So one of the first things I learned as a photographer at that time, I was an apprentice photographer on a newspaper in Kent, was always be on time. In fact, don't always be on time, always be before time. So I'd been sent to photograph Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon at the opening of a new bridge that went over the River Medway in Kent, where I lived. And by the time I arrived there, I thought, well, no one's going to be there. And there were thousands of people there at the bridge. And I couldn't see Princess Margaret or Snowdon at all. So I thought the only thing I can do was that, fortunately, right next to the bridge and where they were going to meet the Lord Mayor of Rochester was this high wall. And so I managed to clamber up. And so I had a high position actually to show what exactly was going on. And I took this photograph of the crowd, the Lord Mayor meeting Princess Margaret and Snowdon with the bridge in the background. And they thought this was such a clever idea, thank goodness, at the time, because at that time I was having to prove myself, a young photographer, at the same time. Years later, by this time I was working in Fleet Street. So when I first came to London, I was just newly married, and basically I was offered a job on a newspaper in West London, but I wanted to get into Fleet Street as well. So I used to do what was as a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift on the Evening Standard, 3 or 4 days a week. Then I would do 2:30 to 10:30 on my paper in West London on that shift.
Work on a newspaper is people working as a team. Reporters, feature writers, copy editors, and photographers, all striving to meet a deadline.
And then I would do an 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning at Playboy. And I did that for 6 months and collapsed, under all this at the time. But in reality, we were creating, and I was creating, the opportunities to move forward, in my photography career and the newspaper career as well. I was quite a young photographer in real terms, and again, this was an assignment that should have just been quite a simple, it's what we call Mickey Mouse types of photography, you can't hardly miss it, that the royal family knew what they were doing. I hopefully knew what I was doing as well. The Queen Mother and Diana, who I worked with a lot as well, all had their ways about them where they would support people like myself. And she was always the most loved member of the royal family, the Queen Mother.
Prince William himself demonstrated that he's serious, self-confident, almost nonchalant. But, like any other 6-month-old, he'd not yet understood the phrase, being on your best behaviour. Prince of Wales decided to provoke some action, first with a handkerchief and assorted noises.
When I first started in photography, the cameras that you see in the old gangster movies, the 5.4 press cameras that they had, with the big, the flash gun, that's what we trained on. I was like you, I was like a whippet, there was not an ounce of fat on me at all, because you would have two leather cases, one with what was called 12 slides, and that was the film, and the other one was the camera and 6 slides. They weighed a ton, and I used to go around on the bus, to my assignment. So as I say, there wasn't an ounce of fat on me at all. And then a new newspaper started up within my group, and they thought, well, they can't have me working with this anymore because they needed me as a working photographer. So then it came to this, and this is when I first put on weight, So this is a twin lens reflex Rolleiflex. And it's a great camera. I think this is a 3.5 if I remember right, unless it's a 2.8, it's one of them. And this was the staple camera at my time to actually do all the assignments with as well. And so you can sort of flip the lids, and in those days, although the magnifying glass is not working, here we go. And so when you were working with something like this, this is the viewing lens, that's the taking lens to it. So you had to be extremely accurate. it was as simple as that. Because if you weren't, and so what it taught you was accuracy and making sure that everything was good beforehand. So you went through mental preparations anytime you went to an assignment at the same time. You know, I mean, these were much better cameras. They were manual cameras, but you had to know how to use them properly. And so the training I had with the old gangster movie cameras to start off with, you know, in those days, not even the rangefinders on the old gangster movie cameras that we had worked. So you had to know 3, 6 and 9 yards. And that's how you set the camera, on the tracking system that I had for focus on 3, 6 or 9 yards, depending on how far you were away from the subject that you worked, and you hoped that everything was in focus. I mean, they weighed a ton, these cameras. So at least when we got to this type of camera, you could actually focus, you could actually see what you were doing. And they were. This brings me back, to your age group again. They were such valuable cameras to actually use. If you went to a football match, for example, you would put that down. It would normally stay, and you would photograph through like that. So for action, you'd put this bit down and just look through and just photograph it that way. So they were great cameras, I mean, I took a lot of my early photographs on these cameras. I've got a feeling, actually, I did the photographs, if I think back, God, it's a long time now, 55 years. But I think I actually took the photographs of Margaret and Snowdon on this type of camera. When I first came to London and I worked in Fleet Street, I was a hard news photographer. So I used to cover the riots and anything that similar to that type of thing, and I loved it. But my problem was that I loved it so much. The only thing I had of fear in those days was not getting the photograph. So if there was a riot, I'd be right in the middle of the riot. One day I stood in front of this horse charge. So I saw these horses lining up the street, and I thought they're going to charge anyway. So I got the wide-angle lens on. I thought this can make a great photograph, So I stood in the middle of the road, and they came charging down towards me. And I thought, as I was taking the photographs, and it was a really powerful photograph. And I thought, if I move left or right, I'm dead. So I hoped that they were good enough horsemen to swerve past me, so that I could get my shot. And then the next day, one of the chief commissioners rang up the editor of the paper and saying, for God's sake, stop him doing what he's doing, because he'll get killed, And so the next week I'm on film sets. They've moved me from those types of things. And I think in television as well, television are going to need people like you. That the industry is expanding all the time. I want to live for another 30 years, I want to see what's the next advances that are going on in television at the same time, and filming and the whole thing. Because it's fantastic, what you can do right now. I sit in TV studios right now and I'm working with the different broadcasters. And I'm sat there thinking, why do they want me? I'm just a normal person. I've been extremely lucky, with the things that I do, and I suppose I was able to push a button, so I became a photographer. And my mother always said, you've got a good Scottish tongue in your head as well, and always use it. So then I became a broadcaster. So I've been extremely lucky with everything that I do as well. And so it comes back to devotion. And the reality with devotion is, if you love what you do, if you value what you do, if you value that the message that you are putting out is the most important message in this world, that's devotion.